please be advised that there is material that will be presented that is not AA conference approved material. We believe that Joe and Charlie clearly state when they present material that is not AA conference approved material. The presentation has been color-coded to better assist you as to the origin of the information.
Now about sex. Many of us needed an overhauling there. Now you older fellas, don't get your hopes up. We're not talking about physical, we're talking about mental. But above all, we try to be sensible on this question. It's so easy to get way off the track. Here we find human opinions run into extremes, absurd extremes perhaps. One set of voices cry that sex is a lust of our lower nature, a base necessity of procreation. I've heard them all my life. They're the ones that say sex is a dirty thing. You ought to do it at one time, in one position, with one person only. And the only reason to do it is to reproduce yourself. And if you enjoy it, it's a sinful thing. I've heard them as far back as I can remember. They are to the extremes on one side. Then we have the voices who cry for sex and more sex, who bewail the institution of marriage, who think that most of the troubles of the race are traceable to sex causes. They think we do not have enough of it or that it isn't the right kind. They see its significance everywhere, and you hear them today. They're the ones that say you ought to be able to have sex anytime you want to, with anybody you want to, as many people as you want to, in any position you want to. You ought to be able to enjoy it every time, and if you don't, there must be something wrong with you. Maybe they refer to that as the sexual revolution. Main thing I see wrong with it, it happened 35 years too late for me to participate in it, I know that. I wouldn't be able to keep up with it. Now the book says we want to stay out of this controversy. We do not want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We all have sex problems. We'd hardly be human if we didn't. What can we do about them? And I read that last statement with great relief, because I knew this book was getting ready to condemn me for what I had been in the past. I knew it was getting ready to tell me what I was going to have to do in the future, and I'd made up my mind that I wasn't going to pay any attention to it at all. I'm glad to find out we're not going to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. We simply are not going to get into that issue of what's right and what's wrong and etc. Our book is meant to be helpful to any human being anywhere in the world. And if we start trying to tell people how to conduct their sex lives, what they can do and what they can't do, then surely, we're going to begin to alienate people. Besides that, what's sexually acceptable in one part of the world may not be acceptable at all in another part of the world. So we're not going to get into that issue. What we are going to see is a way to review our own sex conduct of the past, to see if perhaps we've hurt some people through that type of sex conduct, see if maybe we can't shape a new type of sex conduct for the future and still be able to engage in it and enjoy it, yet at the same time not hurt other people. And basically that's all we're going to be looking at, Joe.
And we're going to do exactly with this area about sex what we did about fears and resentment. We're going to do what the book says. Simply, we're going to find the facts. We're going to face the facts. We're going to engage in a process to accept the facts. And again, we're going to talk about ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which is all we're talking about here. And I don't want to be the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct, I guarantee you on that. I needed an overhauling in that area when I arrived in Alcoholics Anonymous. Told you my dad was in that house for 3 years and 7 months and 13 days. He got out of the nut house after some time and went to California on an out-of-state release, which left me and the rest of the kids to get bigger. Not grow up, but get bigger. And when I was about 10 or 11 years old, maybe closer to 11, I went to my mom and I told her I've been thinking about sex a lot. And she said, oh, it scared her. She said, oh my God, Benny Joe. That's my name.
Benny Joe.
Benny Joe. She said, "Oh my God, Benny Joe, that's not a very good thing to think about. In fact, it's a dirty, filthy thing to think about, and you ought to save it for the one you love." Think about that. And besides, only time you want to have sex is when you want to have children. Well, I'm quick, and she had 5 kids, so I figured she had sex 5 times. And well, no wonder my dad was in the nut house. I figured. And we had sex education when I went to school too, but they called it recess. But in West Tulsa, Oklahoma, there were some in front of the Jenkins Cafe at 21st and Quanah, and there was a bunch of wise, intelligent, experienced men and women of about 15 or 16 years old who knew everything there was to know about it and more than happy to share it with me. And they began to tell me, some of those guys did, the things that they were doing with these little girls, and my eyes started getting bigger and bigger. And how often they were doing it with these little girls, and my eyes got bigger and bigger. And the only problem with all that is that I was 3 or 4 years sober before I figured out that they were lying to me. Or at least I hope they were lying to me. I never could live up to what they were saying out there. So you can see, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had the spiritual knowledge of a 7-year-old boy, the coping skills of an 89-year-old boy, and the sexual knowledge of an 11, 12-year-old boy that I learned off the streets from people who didn't know any more about it than I did. Do you think I didn't need an inventory in that area? How many of you kind of got your sexual information somewhat like I did? Somewhat. We need an inventory to find out what is right and what is wrong for me. That's what I'm doing in this inventory process. The first time I got married, did real well for a couple of years, and then I went out on my wife when I was drinking one night, and the next day I felt bad. I mean, I really felt bad. I'm supposed to feel bad. I didn't know that, and didn't know a lot of things. And but the next time I went out, it wasn't quite so bad as the first time. And the next time it wasn't quite so bad as the last time. And as time went by, it got to where it didn't hurt at all. And then, that's the thing about principles. If we don't have any principles to live by, ultimately we don't have any reasons to live. Such are principles. And that's where I found myself in the end of my drinking and the end of my time before I come to AA. I'd compromised every principle known to man and God before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. Charlie likes to tell me, let me tell you about the first time I had sex. I was selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, inconsiderate, and I was also alone. Do you think you would like to hear anything from? No, I don't believe so.
That's why he's wearing glasses today too. Every time we say that, I look out there and about a dozen of you guys whip your glasses off and put them in there. Okay, we see in the next paragraph the directions on how to review our sex life. Same directions we had for resentments, just worded a little bit differently, which is Bill's way of doing it. He said we reviewed our own conduct over the years past. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? That's column 5. Whom had we hurt? That's column 1. Did we unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? Where were we at fault? What should we have done instead? We got this all out on paper and looked at it. So once again, to avoid any confusion, we just made up another little inventory sheet. Looks almost like the resentment sheet, except it's called a review of our own sex conduct. Column 1, who did I hurt? I doubt if anybody in here this morning has ever hurt anybody in the sexual area that we don't know just exactly who that was. That seems to be a form of knowledge that we all have. And we've hurt people in that area. We usually know who we've hurt. Now, there may be some question as to, well, what do we do to hurt people in the sexual area? And I think we hurt them in many different ways. If I'm in a marriage situation and I go outside of my marriage and I have sex out there, and my wife finds out about it, then surely I've created a problem for her. If not physically, at least emotionally. If there's children in my home and that sexual escapade creates a real problem between my wife and I've hurt my children by the same identical thing. If the lady I had sex with out there, if it becomes common knowledge, I'll probably hurt her too. If she has a husband and he finds out about it, I've hurt him also. And if she has children, I've hurt them too. You know, one sex act could hurt several different people. I think sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area simply by demanding more than our fair share. Maybe our partner isn't too keen about having sex every time we want to, and we selfishly demand that they have sex with us rather than consider their needs, wants, and desires. Surely we create a problem for them when we do that. I think sometimes we hurt people in the sexual area by demanding that they do things with us sexually that they really don't want to do. And again, rather than consider their needs, wants, and desires, we selfishly demand that they do those things with us. Surely we create a problem for them when we do so. I think sometimes we might hurt people in the sexual area simply by withholding sex. You know, maybe we're not too keen to have sex every time our partner wants to. And rather than consider their needs and wants and desires, we selfishly withhold sex when perhaps we should give in a little more often. Many ways we hurt people in the sexual area. I think we all pretty well know who they are, what they are, and who we've hurt. Column 1, we just make a list of those names. Column 2, what did I do? Did I commit adultery? Did I selfishly demand they do something to me when they didn't want to? Did I force sex on them when they didn't want to have it? If we know who we've hurt, we know exactly what we did to hurt them. We put that down in column 2. Column 3. Which part of self is affected here? Now, I think this could be one of the most revealing things for ourselves we can possibly do. You would think that if I hurt anybody in the sexual area, it would be caused by the sex instinct. And I guess once in a while that would be true. In order to get the physical gratification, the emotional gratification that comes at the moment of completion of the sex act, I might be doing it at the wrong time, in the wrong place, with the wrong person because of the sex instinct. But I think if we carefully look at each situation, we're going to find out the other two instincts are involved just as much as sex, and in many cases even more so, and sometimes sex really didn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. Now, I'm going to express an opinion, and I want to be sure everybody understands just my opinion. Not Joe's, not AA's, it's mine. I am convinced today that God gave us the sex urge so that we could reproduce ourselves. I'm also convinced He made it a very pleasurable thing so we would do so. I don't think you and I would do the kind of work involved in sex if we didn't get some kind of reward for doing so. And the great reward is that emotional and physical feeling at the moment of completion of the sex act, one of the greatest feelings a human being can have. Now, if we're doing sex for purposes other than reproduction or enjoyment, we're probably doing it for purposes other than what God intended. Good example. We boys, when we grew up, we learned that you could use sex to build your self-esteem. After all, the more members of the opposite sex you can attract to yourself, the greater man you really are, we thought. And we boys call that John Wayneism. And some of you girls tell me you did the same thing. I don't know what you called it.
Jane Wayne.
Joe says you called it John Wayneism. Or Jane Wayneism. Now, if that's what we're using sex for, to build our self-esteem, then that's not to reproduce, that's not to enjoy, but that's to fulfill a part of the social instinct. Sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with that. Sometimes we use sex to buy a relationship. a personal relationship. Maybe we're just lonesome. We want somebody to pay attention to us. And we found out a long time ago we could give sex and buy back a personal relationship. Now that's not to reproduce, that's not to enjoy. That's to fulfill also a part of the social instinct. Sometimes we use sex to buy material security. Maybe we're in a sexual situation we really would rather not even be in. But we've come so overly dependent upon another human being for our material well-being that we give sex to buy back material security. It has nothing to do with reproduction or enjoyment. That's for material security to fulfill the security instinct. Just think, sometimes we use sex to get even with another human being. And we find out our partner's gone out and done something they shouldn't have done. And we say we'll show them. Infuriates the hell out of us. And we go out and do the same identical thing to get even with them. And the fallacy in it is after we've done so, we can't afford to tell them. But we didn't use sex there to reproduce or enjoy. We used it to get even with another human being. Sometimes we use sex to force our will on another human being. Maybe our partner isn't doing what we think they ought to do. So we say we'll show them. We'll just cut them off at the pass and we won't let them have any until they come around to our way of thinking. Now we boys aren't too good at that. We only last 2 or 3 days. You girls have honed it to perfection. You know exactly how to do that, and it works almost every time. That's not to reproduce. That's not to enjoy. That's to force our will on another human being. Sex really doesn't have anything to do with that. I was absolutely amazed as I filled out that third column. 2 things began to happen to me in the third column. The first thing that began to happen to me is a lot of my guilt began to disappear. I thought I was just a dirty, rotten, no-good SOB. But I found out that I used sex for purposes other than what God intended. Not because I'm a bad, filthy human being, but because I'm a sick human being. And I use sex to build my self-esteem. I use sex to build my security. And sex really didn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. A lot of my guilt began to disappear. The other thing that began to happen to me in column 3 is my desire to go do it at the wrong time in the wrong place with the wrong people began to become less and less and less. You see, I always thought I was oversexed, and that's why I did those things. No, I wasn't oversexed at all. I was undersecure, and I used sex to build my self-esteem. And when I saw that, that began to look kind of dumb to do that. And the desire to go do it at the wrong time with the wrong person became less and less and less. And I began to get a little handle on this thing right here in step 3. Most of we men especially, our problems in the sexual area don't have anything to do with sex. Most of them deal with self-esteem. And I find for the ladies, most of it deals with control issues. Sex really doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with that stuff. And we see the stupidity behind it. Then the desire to do it becomes less and less and less. Amazing. Column 4. What feelings did I create in others? Did I unjustifiably arouse jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? What should I have done instead? Not only are we looking to see what we did to hurt another, but we're trying to shape a new sex life in the future where we can still engage in and enjoy it, so I need to be looking at what should I have done instead, aiming toward a new type of sex life in the future. Column 5. Same basic character defects. Where had I been selfish? Where had I been dishonest? Where had I been self-seeking and frightened? Where had I been inconsiderate? Which of the above character defects caused me to do what I did to harm another? I begin to see once again that old personality that I had developed through living a life run on self-will. I begin to see that if I stay selfish, If I say it's dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate, I'm going to keep right on doing the same things over and over and over and over. I'll keep right on hurting other people. They're going to retaliate and create pain and suffering for me, and even if they don't catch me at it, the guilt and the remorse is going to eat me up. Absolutely. Every time. So once again, we're doing step 4. This is the sexual part of it. Column 5, I see the exact nature of the wrong. I'm going to talk about to another human being. A sexual harm is the wrong. But what's with it be that caused it? A fellow comes to me with a step 5. I don't care whether he's committed adultery 2 times or 100 times. What we need to figure out is what was in him that causes him to do that? Is he doing it through a selfish reason? Is he doing it through fear? Is he doing it through inconsideration? That's what we're going to talk about in step 5. In the 5th column, I see the character defects I'm going to be willing to turn loose of in step 6. In the 5th column, I see the shortcomings I'm going to ask God to take away in step 7. And quite naturally, all the names in column 1 will come off of this list and be added to the list to be used later on for steps 8 and 9. They are people I've harmed. And you know what really blew my mind? Is I kept seeing a lot of the same names appearing on all 3 sheets. Barbara was on the resentment sheet, Barbara was on the fear sheet, and Barbara was on the sex sheet. I had never tied that together in my mind before. I even had the Internal Revenue Service on all 3 sheets. I resented them and I feared them, and I gave them a pretty good screwing before I got through with it. I think this is one of the best things we can possibly do for ourselves, is working on this sheet here and seeing what really does go on in our lives. It's amazing what this reveals to us.
And the book says, in this way, the way that we just described, we tried to shape a sane and sound ideal for our future sex life. We subjected each relation to this test: was it selfish or not? We used prayer 3 different times in the area of sex, and here's the first one. We asked God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. We remembered always that our sex powers were God-given and therefore good, neither to be used lightly or selfishly, nor to be despised or loathed. Whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. We must be willing to make amends where we've done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. In other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. In meditation, more prayer, we ask God what we should do about each specific matter. The right answer will come if we want it. Now, God alone can judge our sex situation. Counsel with other persons is often desirable, but we let God be the final judge. We realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. We avoid hysterical thinking or advice.
This is an area that I don't think we need a whole lot of advice on anyhow. You know, I think deep down inside, we all know what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. You know, if God dwells in each of us, the answers are there. I've never been in a sexual situation yet that was wrong, that I didn't know it was wrong before I ever got into it. Didn't keep me from getting into it, but I always knew it was wrong before I did. And I don't think in this area we need a whole lot of advice. Besides that, you go ask a half a dozen people for advice on a specific sexual issue, and you'll probably get a half a dozen different answers. And then you're going to have to decide which one of those you're going to try to follow. And I can't really think of a worse place in the world to get sexual advice than Alcoholics Anonymous anyhow. It's a bad place to get it. So.
Okay. Suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Does this mean we're going to get drunk? Well, some people tell us so, but this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. Now, if we're sorry for what we've done and have an honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we'll be forgiven and have learned our lesson. Now, if we're not sorry and our conduct continues to harm others, we're quite sure to drink. We're not theorizing. These are facts of our experience. To sum up about sex, more prayer. We earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and for strength to do the right thing. If sex is very troublesome, we'll throw ourselves harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. This takes us out of ourselves. It quiets the horny condition. It quiets the imperious urge. When to yield would mean heartache.
Oh, Bill used some pretty fancy words in there once in a while, didn't he? Okay, now before we leave the inventory, we want to do one more thing. When we get to step 8, it says we have the list, we made it, and we took step 4. We've taken some of the names from the resentment sheet, some from the fear sheet, all of them from the sex sheet, and now then, there's probably still some people we've hurt in other ways other than sexual, and we might as well go ahead and take a look at them now, because we're going to have them anyhow when we get to step 8. So we made up another little inventory sheet called a review of harms other than sexual. People we've hurt in other ways. Maybe somebody we've stolen from that their name hasn't appeared on any of the sheets. Maybe somebody we hurt physically in some way. Their name had. Maybe somebody we undercut and took their jobs from them. People we've hurt in ways other than sexual that hasn't shown up on any of the sheets. Column 1. Who did I hurt? Column 2. What did I do to hurt them? Column 3. Which part of self is affected? Column 4. What feelings did I create in others? Column 5. Where had I been? Which character defect was involved that caused me to do the thing that hurt the other human being? And if we'll do that when we're through with this sheet, then we've got a complete, full inventory. And again, we're doing step 4. In the 5th column, we see all the information we need for steps 5, 6, and 7. And in the 1st column, those names will come off and be added to the list for step 8. And when we do that, then we've completed our inventory, we've looked at our resentments, and we've gotten rid of resentments. We've looked at our fears, and we've gotten rid of fears. We've looked at our sexual harms. We're beginning to try to shape a new sex life in the future. We've looked at all the people we've hurt in the past, and we've seen the truth behind what we did to them. We have gained a lot of information. The book says if we've been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. We have listed and analyzed our resentments. He doesn't say it, but we've listed and analyzed our fears. We've listed and analyzed our sexual harms. We've listed and analyzed our harms other than sexual. We have begun to comprehend their futility and their fatality. We have commenced to see their terrible destructiveness. Now here's some positive happenings. We have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward albeit even our enemies. My God, what a personality change already. For an alcoholic to begin to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, what a change that is. For we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we've hurt by our conduct and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. In this book you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. We hope you are now convinced that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from Him. If you've already made a decision,
Step 3.
And an inventory of your grosser handicaps.
Step 4.
An inventory of your grosser handicaps.
Our resentments, our fears, our sexual harms, and the harms done to others other than sexual.
Our inventory of our grosser handicaps.
Our selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes.
You have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. You know, one of the great mistakes we see in AA today is everybody's wanting to sit around and wait till they can do step 4 perfect before they do step 4. They got the cart before the horse. The book recognizes that we've looked at just our grosser handicaps, those things that really block us off from God, those things that create our problems with other human beings. We've done absolutely the best we can in step 4. Now later on we've got another step where we're going to rehone this process and refine it for the rest of our lives. So what we need to do is get on with this thing, do step 4 to the utmost of our ability, get the positive results from it, then we can continue on with the rest of the program. There's no need to procrastinate, and we will never do it perfect.
I've never known anybody to do this thing perfectly that I'm aware of.
They want to get well before they do step 4. They got the cart before the horse. It don't work that way.
The thing I like about it is we started this process explaining it yesterday about 15 minutes till 4. And here it is 10:30. We've been on it about 2 hours and a half, I guess, or 45 minutes explaining. It takes a lot more time to explain it than it does to do it. You could go home and do this inventory in one evening if you wanted to. Get a little information on the working knowledge of those words and the basic instincts of life out of the 12 and 12. Look up some of these words in the dictionary so you'll have a working knowledge of them. Step 3, or column 3 is the one that generally trips everybody up. And get a little working knowledge on that and then set out to do it. In a couple hours you can have the inventory process done. It's that simple, really. We didn't psychoanalyze ourselves at all. We just found the facts. We're going to face the facts. We're engaging in a process to accept the facts.
Now, I don't know whether you all have noticed or not, but nearly all the information in the big book on sex is on page 69. I don't know that that has any significance whatsoever, but that happens to be where most of it is. We heard a story about a young lady who went to her sponsor and said, "Sponsor, I've got a problem." And her sponsor said, "What is it?" She said, "Well, it's this sex thing." She said, "Everything I've ever done in the sexual area, it's always been while drinking. And I really don't know what to do nor how to function sober. I need help." And her sponsor said, "Well, I suggest you go home and get out the big book, read page 69, and you'll have the answers that you need to all your sexual problems, the attraction of a member of the opposite sex, or whatever you have to have." So the young lady went home, got out the big book, and proceeded to read, but she got confused on page numbers. Instead of page 69, she read page 96. Just for the hell of it, why don't you go to 96 for a moment and see what she read? That's one of the most appropriate things I've ever read. It just goes on and on and on and on.
Having made our personal inventory, well, what should we do about it? Well, that's a good question, isn't it? Well, we've been trying to get a new attitude. Remember, Dr. Jung said ideas, emotions, and attitudes. We've been trying to get some new attitudes and a new relationship with our Creator. Back on page 45, it said the main object of this book was enable me to find a power greater than myself, which would solve my problem. And I'm trying to get a new relationship with our Creator. And to discover the obstacles in our path. And so what are some of the obstacles? Our resentment, our fears, our harms done to others. We've ascertained, we have admitted certain defects. And what are those defects? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, frightened, and inconsiderate attitudes. And we've ascertained in a rough way what the trouble is. We put our finger on the weak items in our personal inventory. Now these are about to be cast out. This requires action on our part, which when completed will mean that we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our defects. This brings us to the 5th step in the program of recovery mentioned in the preceding chapter.
Okay, we've got to stop now and look at a couple of words. Step 5 says we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. But you'll notice here in the narrative He says we admitted to God and ourselves and another human being the exact nature of our defects. And people used to ask Bill about this. They'd say, Bill, why did you use the word wrongs in step 5, yet in the narrative of step 5 you used the word defects? And they said, by the way, Bill, what's the difference anyhow between a wrong in 5 and a shortcoming in? They said people would ask Bill those questions and he would kind of rear back and smile. And he would say, when I took English and writing courses in college, they taught me not to use the same word over and over and over. He said, that shows how dumb you really are.
You know.
He said, there really are no differences in these words. He said, in step 4, we're going to find those things that block us off from the sunlight of the Spirit. He said, in step 5, we're going to talk about those things to another human being to be sure we're right. In step 6, we're going to become willing to have God remove those things. In step 7, we're going to ask Him to take them away. And he said, you can call them anything you want to. A wrong, a fault, a defect, a mistake, a personality flaw, a shortcoming, or whatever you wish to. And we'll notice in the next couple of pages that's exactly what he does, using these words interchangeably back and forth. I followed it up in the 12 and 12, which he wrote 13 years later. And not only does he do it there, but he even does it worse than the 12 and 12. And we're convinced that in Bill's mind, these things were all the same. We find out what blocks us off in 4. We talk about it to somebody else in 5. We're willing to turn loose of it in 6. And we ask God to take it away in 7. And we can call it whatever we wish to.
This is perhaps difficult, especially discussing our defects.
He did it again right there.
With another person. We think we've done well enough at admitting these things through ourselves. Well, there's doubt about that. In actual practice, we usually find that a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. Many of us thought it necessary to go much further. We'll be more reconciled to discussing ourselves with another person when we see a good reason why we should do so. The best reason first. If we skip this vital step, we may not overcome drinking. Time after time, newcomers have tried to keep to themselves certain facts about their lives. Trying to avoid this humbling experience, they turned to easier methods, and almost invariably, they got drunk. A solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. I did the very best that I could do with the limited knowledge that I have filling these out. And now I'm going to take them to another human being, someone who's walked this walk before me, who can see things in me that I can't see in myself, because a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient. To give you an idea, as I look around the rooms here today, and I know a lot of you are better today than I did Friday, and I see several defective characters sitting around. There's one right over there.
4 or 5 right here. 4 or 5 right here on this front table.
I mean, it's very plain to me. I can see it. Because there's nothing between me and you except air. But between me and me is a lifetime of rationalization and justification, and I just can't see past all that. That's why I need another human being to help me see things in me that I can't see in myself. And I'm sure if I had any defects of character, you'd be able to see them. But that's why we need someone else to help us to do it, because a solitary self-appraisal is insufficient.
Now he tells us why. On page 73, at the top of the page, having persevered with the rest of the program, they wondered why they fell. We think the reason is they never completed their house cleaning. They took inventory all right, but hung on to some of the worst items in stock. They only thought they had lost their egoism and fear. They only thought they had humbled themselves. But they had not learned enough of humility, fearlessness, and honesty. In a sense, we find it necessary, and they told someone else all their life story. Now there's the little statement that screwed us up in step 4. We read that, we went back to step 4, and we started writing our life story for the inventory. And as we said the other day, that 95% of my life story has nothing to do with my alcoholism anyhow. The fact that I was born in 1929 has nothing to do with it. The fact that I went in the service right after high school has nothing to do with it. The fact I was married at age 21 has nothing to do with it. But the 95% that had nothing to do with it very effectively covered up the 5% that did. But I'll tell you what did have something to do with it. If I've done my inventory the way the book says, I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. One of the things that causes me to drink. My resentments didn't come just today. They've been popping in my head as far back as I can remember, and they go back there years and years and years and years. I've shared all my life story resentment-wise. I've shared all my life story fears-wise. They didn't come in my head just today. Some of my fears went way, 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 way back to my early childhood. I've shared all my life story fears-wise. The harms I've done to others, they didn't happen just today. I've been hurting people all my life, as far back as I can remember. My mother said to me one time, she said, "Charlie, you the meanest kid I ever saw." She said, "I had a little trouble loving you myself." And when Mama's got a little trouble loving you, you're getting in bad shape. I've shared all my life story harms-wise. And as I look at my life story, that's all it's made up of anyhow. Through the sharing of the resentments, through the sharing of the fears, through the I've shared everything in my life with another human being. So we don't really have any quarrel with that statement. But now here's the reason we really need to do this, step 5. More than most people, the alcoholic leads a double life. He's very much the actor. To the outer world, he presents his stage character. This is the one he likes his fellows to see. He wants to enjoy a certain reputation, but knows in his heart he doesn't deserve it. The inconsistency is made worse by the things he does on his sprees. Coming to his senses, he's revolted at certain episodes he vaguely remembers. These memories are a nightmare. He trembles to think someone might have observed him. As fast as he can, he pushes these memories far inside himself. He hopes they will never see the light of day. He is under constant fear and tension, and that makes for more drinking. Psychologists are inclined to agree with us. We spent thousands of dollars for examinations. We know but few instances where we've given these doctors a fair break. We have seldom told them the whole truth, nor have we followed their advice. Unwilling to be honest with these sympathetic men, we were honest with no one else. We need to face the fact that we alcoholics have become the world's greatest con artists. You have to. If you're going to be a practicing alcoholic, you've got to learn how to lie. You've got to learn how to cheat. You've got to learn how to steal. You've got to learn how to manipulate people, places, and things. And I think we have become the absolute greatest world's con artists. Now, if you've been doing that for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, or 40 years, you come to AA, and you do step 4. You're just as honest with yourself as you can possibly be. But we need to face the fact that we can't be honest with ourselves. We've used rationalization and justification for so long that we can't really see the truth about ourselves. Even the most spiritual people in the world tell me the same thing, that it's necessary for them to discuss themselves from time to time with another human being. They say, we can't see the truth about ourselves either. And we alcoholics certainly cannot. We do the best we can in step 4. But now we need to take our inventory to another human being so they can see the truth about those things we can't see. They look at it from an outside objective, and they can see things in that inventory that we can't see ourselves. So then the question becomes, well, who do you take it to? Page 74 was written, remember, back in 1937, 38, and 39. The first person up here in Canada, they had difficulty finding somebody to take this step 5 with. The first person in California had difficulty finding somebody. Page 74 gives a list of suggestions for people to use in those days. Today, though, AA is worldwide. Today we've got plenty of good, knowledgeable AA sponsors that we can go to take step 5 with. If we belong to a religion that requires confession, we probably need to go do that. But even then, we still need it to take it to somebody who knows what we're trying to do. Somebody who understands steps 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 according to the Big Book Alcoholics Anonymous. Somebody who can help me see things I can't see myself. They're not going to change column 1. They're not going to change column 2. They're probably going to change some things in column 3. Where I said this was caused by my sex instinct, he said, oh, no. You're just trying to build your self-esteem here. That's all you're doing. He helped me see things I couldn't see. Probably not going to change column 4, but he changed some things in column 5. I said this one was caused by fear. He said, no, this is just plain damn dishonesty. That's all this is. I said this one was in consideration. He said, no, this is plain selfishness. He helped me see things about me I can't see. That's the real purpose of step 5. Confession's good for the soul, but that's not really all that step 5 is about. It's to extract every bit of useful, honest information we can about ourselves from step 4. We're getting ready to start now on a lifetime changing process. And we got to be sure that what we're trying to change is the right thing. And we just can't do it by ourselves. Okay, we decide who we're going to take step 5 with. Page 75 now tells us how to take it.
So when we decide who is to hear our story, we waste no time. There's that time factor again. We have a written inventory and are prepared for a long talk. We explain to our partner what we're about to do and why we have to do it. He should realize that we engage upon a life and death errand. Most people approached in this way will be glad to help. They will be honored by our confidence. Now we pocket our pride and go to it, eliminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once having taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted.
Now look at the positive results coming from step 5.
More promises. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone in perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience.
Step 2, we came to believe, but now we begin to know, we begin to have a spiritual experience.
The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we're on a broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Now these forms come in real handy in the area of the 5th step. Because remember I said simplicity is the key, and we're going to take this forms to another human being, and we're going to discuss these from left to right all the way across, talking in great detail. Talk as much as I want to about those situations. Those little simple words are simply key words to remind me to talk about those things in the 5th step. And when I get through with this, I'm like Charlie. I will have told all my life story about my resentments. I will have told all of my life story about my fears. All of my life story about the guilt, shame, and remorse that I have as the result of the harm I've done others. Because I can go into great detail and discuss these things all I want to. And my sponsor will help answer me questions about these things. So those are just key words to remind me in the 5th step to talk about them. That's all. That's why we are simple in filling those things out.
And through the use of the form, it keeps the 5th step in some semblance of order.
Yeah.
We got things written down. We're going to talk about them in a sequence. Otherwise, you just kind of jump from this to that to something else and back and forth, and really gets confusing. These forms really keep it tied down to where it needs to be.
Yeah, sometimes they'll be doing the 5th step, and God will be talking about the first line there, and then he'd be talking about somebody down on the 5th or 6th line, and me as a person receiving the 5th step will say, wait a minute, we're not finished with that first line yet. Let's go back up there and talk about this some more. You see? Some order.
Okay, after you've done step 5, you've done a lot of work now in 4 and 5. You're probably tired. Probably need a little rest. And the book gives us a little rest stop now. It says, returning home, we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour. He didn't say 72 days, did he? Every time he mentions a time element, it's always pretty fast in here, indicating that he meant for us to get on with this thing and keep it moving. Carefully reviewing what we've done. We thank God from the bottom of our heart that we know him better. We don't know him yet, but we know him better. Taking this book down from the shelf, we turn to the page which contains the 12 steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals or steps. You see, he's used a different word here to indicate steps. Carefully reading the first 5 proposals, we ask if we've omitted anything. For we are building an arch through which we shall walk a free man at last. Is our work solid so far? Are the stones properly in place? Have we skimped on the cement put into the foundation? Have we tried to make mortar without sand? And again, he's referring to the wonderfully effective spiritual structure through which we're going to pass to freedom, the vital spiritual experience. Step 1, willingness, was the foundation. Step 2, believing, was the cornerstone. Step 3, he told us it was an arch, and step 3 was the keystone of the arch. Now we've put more stones in place through steps 4 and 5. And we ask ourselves those questions. Page 76. If we'd answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can he now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to help us be willing, and that's all of step 6.